Hello guys, welcome back to another session on basics of UiPath. So as a part one of this session, we have seen what are different data types and what are the different variables, and we have seen different ways in order to create variables and the properties of those variables. So now we will see what are arguments and few control statements. So arguments are similar to the variables, but any real-time project doesn't have a single sequence or a single workflow. In order to pass the variables from one workflow to another workflow, we need arguments. So that's where arguments comes into picture. So let's see what are different properties of arguments and how we can pass from one workflow to another workflow. Let's go to studio now. So now I have taken the message box inside same sequence, but in future if I have a separate sequence or I have to make use of a variable from one workflow to another workflow, then in that cases we should make use of arguments. So let's see the properties of arguments. In order to know that, we should go into the arguments panel, which is this one, and like a variable, it also have a name which is used to identify the argument uniquely, and it has the direction which let us know either it's an in argument or out argument, or it's an in or out argument. So let's see, if it's an in argument, that means we are passing it as an input. If it's an out argument, we can expect an output from that argument. In or out, this can be used as an input for one workflow and output for another workflow. So these are the different properties we can use in case of the directions. And this talks about the type, which we have seen already, that denotes the data type of the argument. And again, the default value. If you have seen previous video of this, you can understand what are the different data types and the default values of each data type. So the only difference here is, as we are passing the argument from one workflow to another workflow, so the direction is the one property which let us know what type of an argument it is. If it's an input, output, or in and out. Here I have defined a variable d and I have given a true here. Now let's suppose I'm creating one child sequence, and out of which I would access the variable in different workflow, and I'm dropping the message box here. And now if I wanted to use var d, I'm not able to use this in this workflow, right? So let's see how I can utilize this variable from one sequence to another sequence. So I don't want all this, let me just delete. So first of all, in order to make use of variable d in another workflow, I have to first invoke the workflow. There is an activity called invoke workflow activity. Let me just drop it here. And you can open the workflow and you can import arguments and you can select the particular workflow. Or I can just directly give the name of the workflow here, which is child sequence. I can also browse for the file. Now I'm just opening the workflow here. So it is still showing the warning. That means we haven't imported the arguments. So let me just import the arguments, and it's not showing anything. So first of all, we have to take this as an argument. We have to define this as an argument. And this is going as an input. So let's take input, and it's of type Boolean. I should also declare the argument here, and it's an input argument of type Boolean. So now it is showing the argument which I have to pass, and let's say OK. And now you don't have to define a variable. So there are all these variables available, but we are not using them anymore. So you can just click on remove unused variables, which will not show any of the variables because we are not using them. And this variable also we can delete because we have defined it in the argument section. So let's execute this program, and it is printing true, right? So this is how we can pass the variables from one workflow to another workflow using an argument. So this is a practical example in order to make you understand the difference between variables and then argument. And there's one more important point which I wanted to mention. If you're using a certain variable as an argument, make sure that it is deleted in the variable section. Otherwise, there is a chance where variable will be passed and that could be empty if you're performing some operations here. Let's suppose I'm just commenting out this value and I'm defining a variable d, which is of type boolean, and it's in the sequence. And in the argument, if you're taking true value, let's suppose I'm running this workflow again. If you see, it is returning false. Now from this you have to understand one thing. It is taken as the variable's value, not the argument's value. So if you are using an argument, make sure that value is deleted in the same variable is deleted in the variable section. Because if you, it has returned false because this value is not defined. So default value of a boolean is false. So that's why it has taken as false. So let's delete this and execute. It will return true. This is about arguments. I hope it's clear for you. And now let's jump into the conditional statements.